Are you ready to get a dose of bliss? Then stay tuned, because today we are going to get you a dose of bliss. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. I'm your host Purushottam, and in today's video we are going to talk about the dose of bliss or the dose of happiness. Now you might be wondering, what am I talking about? Am I asking you to take up a prescription of a medical injection which will give you bliss, or am I going to ask you to consume some chemical substances? No, neither of this. Today my video is heavily influenced by neuroscience, and every ounce of the content which I am going to share in today's video, it's heavily backed with scientific research and evidences. Today we are going to talk about one of the most useful and probably not the most followed upon organ of the human body, the economy between the two ears, the human brain. Yes, you heard it right. The human brain, which is the source of all happiness, all achievements, all great virtues, and also the not so good virtues, also the not so good facets of mankind. This brain is such a phenomenal instrument, such a phenomenal organ, that an entire field of study is dedicated to it, and that field of study is called neuroscience. Neuroscience over the past decades has phenomenally progressed. What it was 2 or 3 decades back, now the amount of work and research that eminent neuroscientists have done. Let's take the example of Mr. Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has done phenomenal work in this field, who himself is a neuroscientist. Now, why is it so important to understand the neurochemistry of brain? Because most of us don't realize whatever experiences we have in our life, whatever challenges or whatever achievements or whatever catastrophic failures we face in our life, somewhere the source is all up here. It's in the brain, right? Now, we never consider brain as a holistic organ, like we don't understand the dynamics of it, and because of that, probably we are not much informed about how the brain functions and what are the scientific aspects of the brain which can help us be more productive. Today's video is going to go deep into it. I'm going to talk about dose of bliss, right? The title of this video is Dose of Bliss, a dose of happiness. Now, dose is basically an acronym, which basically every word of this acronym corresponds to a neurotransmitter which is produced in the human brain and which is responsible for the bliss and happiness we human beings experience, and which is also responsible for all the melancholy, all the lamentation, all the grief, sadness and depression which you and me could experience. Hence, it's very important that we understand the mechanics of this. Because let's understand about neuroscience, right? Because I personally find neuroscience to be very fascinating. I am deeply inspired by the researchers, the emerging researchers which have been happening in the field of neuroscience and neuroplasticity in particular. Because the entire premise of neuroplasticity rests on the thought process that the human brain is a plastic instrument, and the more you train it for a particular purpose, the more the results will be visible. So this completely debunks this idea which most of us had probably 2 decades or 3 decades, or probably some of us still have, that our brain, we are all born with a fixed brain, we are all born with a fixed mindset. But that's not the truth. Neuroscience has completely debunked this, and it has told that if you do certain activities, if you change the rhythm of your brain in certain different ways, you can change your thinking process, you can change the dynamics of your brain. Now, to begin with, human brain it can be called as a chemical factory, because it has innumerable neurotransmitters which probably are so deep, and probably they are so much in number that many videos would not be enough to talk about them. But let us talk about those very important 5 chemicals which are of significance to you and me. Because we all want happiness, right? We all want bliss. If you trace every activity which we engage in, from the morning to the night. Everything is because we want to experience happiness. We want to feel good. Now, we have never tried to understand what makes us feel good from a neurochemistry standpoint. So this video is an humble attempt to dive into the neurochemistry of how the brain works, right? So, and one very important aspect is, if we are able to derive value out of this video, you will be bound and inspired to research more about these neurotransmitters. So my attempt here in this video is not to give you not to bombard you with complete information. It is only an humble attempt to inspire you to research in that direction, so that you can help to improve your own brain health, and in the process you will be more productive and a more holistic personality in totality, right? So let's dive deep into the subject. Now, coming to talk about the first neurotransmitter in this acronym called DOSE, it is called dopamine. Now, probably you have heard of dopamine because it's probably the most spoken neurotransmitter in YouTube, and probably you have tons of videos talking about different concepts of dopamine, ranging from dopamine detox, dopamine fasting, what are the benefits of having that dopamine. So to put it in a very simple terms, dopamine is our reward chemical, the feel good chemical, the activities which make you feel good, right? Now, one very interesting aspect of dopamine is it can either make you or break you. Let me explain how does it make you or break you. Now, dopamine is that neurotransmitter in the brain which gives you motivation, which gives you enthusiasm to do any activity. Unless you don't have a good regulation of dopamine in your brain, you will never feel enthusiastic about anything in life. You will never feel an urge of motivation to do any activity if dopamine is lacking in your brain. So dopamine is basically a motivation chemical. Dopamine can also be called as a reward chemical. Whenever you engage in any pleasurable activity, dopamine is released. Now, it is very important for any success, right? To achieve success in any endeavor, enthusiasm is a key ingredient. Motivation is a key ingredient. Hence, dopamine is very important for success. Now, the flip side of it is that, rather the downside of dopamine is, which most of us are sort of conditioned to, or most of the human population is sort of addicted to dopamine. Dopamine is the source of all addictions in the world. It can be from the addiction of social media, mindlessly scrolling. Yes, mindlessly scrolling over your mobile releases dopamine and you feel good about it. Any activity which instantly gives you pleasure releases dopamine in your brain. And the flip side is, the more amount of dopamine is released through means which are quick, the more the brain craves for those experiences. Let's do a simple experiment. For a certain day, commit that you won't use your mobile at all. I know when I tell this, most of you might think this is impractical. But let me give you a particular argument. You will notice that social media or scrolling mindlessly in the internet has been considered to be an epidemic. In the sense, it's like a pandemic. But we don't realize this. Most people are addicted to their social media because they crave for the dopamine. They don't know why they feel good when they go into social media profiles and mindlessly scroll. But it is their brain asking for dopamine. And when they get the dopamine, what happens is they don't have the same level of enthusiasm towards their other activities. This is what happens in addictions. It can be mobile addiction, it can be alcohol addiction, addiction of any sort. The root cause is dopamine. Dopamine is considered to be an addictive chemical. Hence, it's very important to regulate this chemical in the human brain. There is a phenomenal book called The Molecule of More by Daniel Z. Lieberman. I have heard very good reviews of this book, but I haven't personally read it. But I did hear a lot of granularity about dopamine. He has gone deep into the mechanics of dopamine. If you are interested, I will highly recommend you to purchase this book, because this book talks about that particular neurotransmitter which can either make you or break you. So it's very important if you want to understand deep about this neurotransmitter called dopamine. Now the question is, how can dopamine be positively utilized or positively regulated in the human brain, right? So there are a couple of activities. Actually, there are a plethora of activities which are available in Google, and if you just Google, right, what are the different activities I need to engage in to regulate my dopamine, you will find a lot of options. There are a lot of nutritional diet regimes which are also recommended to regulate dopamine. I won't go into that because I will focus more on the physical aspects. I mean, diet is something you can always go and search in your Google or YouTube. So the number one way we can regulate dopamine is through regular, intense physical exercise. Now, most of us think that exercise is only to reduce weight. No. Exercise has everlasting ramifications which probably you don't know. But exercise, not only dopamine, we are going to talk about other neurotransmitters. Exercise helps regulating those as well. When you exercise, right, when you have this exercise regime, dopamine is released in your brain, which instantly makes you feel good. Have you ever noticed after you do your cardio or any particular workout, you immediately start feeling good? Now, why is that happening? Because dopamine was released in your brain. Now, when dopamine is released in a regulated manner through exercise, addictions automatically reduce. Because let's remember, the reason you are addicted to a certain thing is because your brain is craving for dopamine. Now, what you are doing is you are satisfying the craving of dopamine through some other healthy means, and one of those healthy means is exercise. So now your brain probably won't crave for those addictions, and that's also a reason why probably in most of the rehabs and addictive centers they have this habit of physical exercise, because physical exercise sort of floods your brain with the right optimum neurotransmitters. Hence, physical exercise is not only about reducing your weight. Even if you are in a great physical shape, exercise will help you install the right regulated neurotransmitters, and it will optimize your brain health to the next level. So regular exercise is a must, right? Whether you are thin, fat, it doesn't matter. It really not only helps your body but also helps your brain. So dopamine, one of the amazing ways you can regulate dopamine is exercise. Coming to the second one, now this is probably propagated a lot, right? This is about meditation. Now this is not a video on meditation, but meditation is known to regulate dopamine levels. It's not only dopamine, but yes, meditation helps to regulate dopamine, and dopamine is released when you meditate. What happens when you get this deep meditative experience? You suddenly feel blissful, you suddenly feel peaceful, you get that feeling of pleasure after meditating. If you are someone who hasn't tried meditating, there are innumerable techniques and ways. I think we all need to start small. If someone who has never meditated, you need not start with half an hour, you can start with 5 minutes. But the benefits, the regulation of your brain metabolism is going to be top notch. So again, meditation is also another way of regulating your dopamine. Now, dopamine is a chemical which serves as a sort of a neurotransmitter which helps you in assisting you in completing a task. So when you have a particular, if you have a habit of writing to-do lists, like what are the things which I am going to do, and you make sure that you are going to complete that to-do list, then dopamine is released because you gave a goal to your mind and you accomplished that goal. So you are rewarding yourself, right? So dopamine is going to release. And whenever you do win in certain activities or even the smallest of accomplishments, don't forget to reward yourself. Now, this reward yourself can also be in a form of a small compliment, a small pat on your back. Any of these small activities can help you release dopamine. And one very important thing is to reduce the cravings for dopamine, right? Like one example is mindlessly scrolling on social media. This is a lot of researchers have shown this is going to have a lot of detrimental mental health issues if you are mindlessly scrolling on social media and you're wasting your neurotransmitter of dopamine, because you won't have dopamine to do other activities which are more meaningful and which demand a certain level of enthusiasm and motivation. Social media addiction is one such addiction. There are other addictions also. So hope this gave you a holistic perspective of dopamine, and exercise and meditation are the top two ways you can do, and also the third way, create a goal list and stick to it and complete it. Now let's go to the second neurotransmitter. O in the DOSE acronym stands for oxytocin. Now oxytocin is also called the love hormone. Now normally this whole concept of love and this whole concept of cuddling, and whenever you are surrounded with people with whom you sense a sense of belongingness, with whom you have a feeling of compassion, trust, respect and love, oxytocin is naturally released. And if you are someone who loves pets and bees with them, oxytocin is also found to be released in them. And this concept of this missing each other, right? When there are two people who are deeply in love and when they start missing each other, it's actually they are not missing each other, but their brain is craving for this oxytocin hormone. I know when you hear it for the first time, it may sound amusing, but this is how the chemistry of brain works. Now, the fun part is what are the activities which can help you to regulate this oxytocin? Because oxytocin is a very powerful hormone which is released in the human brain, and it is also found that oxytocin is capable of healing heart ailments. So, if you are someone who has some kind of a heart issue, oxytocin might help you heal that quicker. There have been countless researches in that regard. Now, coming to the activities which will help you regulate oxytocin. Now, there are certain activities. Now, exercise comes here as well. Exercise is good for all the neurochemicals in our brain, right? So, it probably is one activity which will help you regulate all the neurotransmitters in your brain. Second is have enough exposure to vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is have exposure to sunlight. The more you expose yourself to sunlight, oxytocin also gets released. And engage in something which you love doing, engage in a particular passionate activity, right? So that is also something which releases your oxytocin hormone. It is said that if a person has very high levels of oxytocin in the brain, now that person is incapable of hating or harboring resentments or harboring grudges. If you look at in today's modern days, right, who do you think will fit in that category? It is our ancient rishis and sages, right, who cannot harbor resentment or feelings of negativity. Probably the brain, in their brain, oxytocin is produced in a huge amount, and that's the reason they harbor this sentiment of belongingness, they harbor this sentiment of Vasudeva Kutambakam, which means a sense of oneness, a sense that who is the person, the soul which is in you is also, I am also the son of the soul which is in, the universal consciousness. He has created so many different souls, and we all sort of source back to that universal consciousness. So we all are in a way not different. We are all part of the divinity. We are all one, but probably physically we look different. Now, this is a very high level of spiritual realization which I am talking, but to sum it up, oxytocin is all about having that nurturing, that sense of belongingness, nurturing that sense of warmth, love and affection. This is all about oxytocin, right? So now let's go to the S in the DOSE acronym, which stands for serotonin. Now, serotonin is called the mood stabilizer hormone. Now, serotonin is also a very dangerous hormone. If it is unregulated in a particular human brain, it can lead to the most violent personalities. Now, this person could also probably commit a murder. It was researched that the criminals who are very impulsive by nature, who are very much triggered by rage, they have significant lower amounts of serotonin. They have a lot of mood fluctuations. Now, these people have a disoriented serotonin level. And serotonin is the hormone which is responsible for giving you a sense of calm, a sense of ease, a well of tranquility. Now, serotonin is the neurochemical which is responsible for that. And it is always giving you a sense of peace, a sense of rhythm, a sense of balance. If you're feeling that, it is because of serotonin. Now, serotonin is also found in the gut and it's also responsible for digestion. Have you ever noticed this, that when your mind is not working, or probably you are in a very stressful state of mind, your digestion also suffers? I personally have noticed this. I'm sure you would have also noticed it, because there's a link between your serotonin neurotransmitter and your digestive system. It won't be an overstatement to say that every part of our brain is connected in some other way, either directly or indirectly, to every cell of our body. Hence, it is always said that 90 to 95% of all diseases are psychosomatic in nature. Hence, it's very important that we realize the profoundness of having an optimum brain health. Okay, so what are the different ways in which we can regulate this hormone of serotonin, right? Now, again, exercise comes again. Exercise is probably the hack for all the neurotransmitters. Now, another very interesting thing is to get enough sleep, right? Now, sleep is known to be one of the most important healing therapies, right? If you are someone who's not been getting adequate sleep, your serotonin levels are going to be affected, and because of that you will have mood fluctuations. People who have a lot of abrupt mood swings, the serotonin levels are fluctuating. Again, meditating helps you, sun exposure helps you. Serotonin also is something which makes you have a deep sense of rhythm in life, the balance in decision making. Until you have a sense of balance, you can't make appropriate decisions. You won't be impulsive. The more regulated your serotonin levels is, lesser the impulsive the person is going to be. And if you are someone who's impulsive, you are going to burst like a volcano. Nobody likes to work or function with a person who can be like a volcano, who's ready to burst out any moment. So it's important to regulate serotonin. Now, coming to the last neurotransmitter, endorphins. Now, this is called as a painkiller hormone. Now, you might be thinking, how is this a painkiller hormone? Yes, endorphin is a painkiller hormone. Now, I want to give you a real life story of a person called Norman Cuisine, who is the famed author of this revolutionary book called The Anatomy of Illness. Anatomy of Illness by Norman Cuisine. So, Norman Cuisine was an American salesman, and he was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder which made him to consume about a lot of 90, probably 40 to 50 painkillers in a particular day. So he had to take 40 to 50 painkillers to ease the pain his body was producing constantly. And it was a life-threatening disease which he had sort of brought about himself. Now, one day, Norman Cuisine was lying and he was really frustrated with life and he was suffering with this physical disease. In one of the conversations, so one of his doctors, a learned doctor, he said that the root cause of your illness is probably some kind of negative feelings or certain resentments or grudges you've been harboring from many years in your life. So Norman suddenly gets this eureka moment and he asks himself, if these negative feelings are giving me disease, will positive feelings give me good health? Certainly they can, right? So Norman does something very unusual and unconventional. He gets out of the hospital and in close proximity to the hospital, he books a hotel room. And in the hotel room, he orders a TV. And for the next couple of days, the only thing he's watching in his television set is comedy movies or comedy shows. He's laughing uncontrollably for a very long period of time. And after a period of time, the dosage of chemicals, which was his initial requirement, drops to half. So, what essentially happened was, the scientific explanation is, laughing produces endorphins in the body. And when you have a very good laugh, endorphins are released in huge amounts, and these serve as painkillers. No matter what chronic ailment you have, the more you laugh, it's not just said that laughter is the best medicine, it is truly a best painkiller because it releases endorphins. And he completely cured himself of his chronic ailment, which required him to take a lot of medicines. You and me cannot even imagine the kind of frustration one would encounter when he has to take a collection of medicines, right? But he cured himself. He has written a full book on anatomy of illness. If somebody wants to read that, you can always feel free to read. So endorphins are also very important. Having a good laugh is a very important thing to release endorphins. And also exercise, right? Exercising is probably, as I am keep repeating in this video, it is important for all the neurotransmitters. Now one another thing, right, which will sort of help regulate probably oxytocin, serotonin and endorphins is positive self-talk. When we engage in negative self-talk, when we engage in negative criticism of things and negative situations or our own self, we are blocking the regulated flow of these neurotransmitters. And in fact, we are producing cortisol, which is called a stress hormone. And cortisol is found to be the source of all diseases in our body. Hence, it's very important that positive self-talk is not just philosophy, it is having groundbreaking physical scientific benefits, right? So, it is important that we help regulate this neurochemicals and we understand what the neurochemistry, the neuroscience of true bliss and true happiness is. One another thing I forgot to mention in my dopamine section is having a purpose or having a central goal in life will also help you regulate dopamine. So this was my short take on these 4 neurotransmitters. A lot can be talked about these 4 neurotransmitters, but the intention of this video was to spark interest in you so that you can research about these neurotransmitters, because ultimately we all want happiness, right? We all want to experience bliss. So if we are going to regulate these 4 neurotransmitters by installing healthy habits, we are bound to get the results. We are bound to feel happy. Hope this video was educational to you. Hope this video was of value to you. And if you really loved this video, don't forget to like and share this video with 2 or 3 of your friends so that you educationalize this content, right? So that you spread this education. Thank you so much and meet you in the next video. Bye.